Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to make a fish spearhead, a two-prong fish spearhead. There's many different types and styles of this type of fish spear. And we have a cabling system that keeps the prongs together and keeps them from spreading apart on a thrust. And we have a tongue so that this fits into a main shaft. And we have a lanyard that would attach to the main shaft so that we don't lose our fish or lose our spearhead. So here is what we're going to be making, a larger one for obviously a much larger fish. And we're using bone barbs here, pine pitch, plant cordage, and the points should be needle sharp, as well as the barbs. We have our dog bane cabling system here. We have our lanyard, dog bane lanyard here, and we have a tongue that would fit onto a shaft so we don't lose our spear. So yeah, we're gonna get started, and it's a bit of a process, but it's not that difficult. It's not that difficult. So let's get started. Okay, so here's a harvested piece of buckthorn, I believe. These little branches make mighty points. They're really, really sharp. They'd be good for gorges and other parts. And I'm going to try to make use of this whole branch. And I'm going to have a few projects. So what we're going to focus on is actually probably this first half here, or maybe this one, not sure. But yeah, buckthorn, it has its uses. It's generally a poisonous shrub. Yeah, it's generally a poisonous shrub, unless you're an herbalist and can extract the compounds in the appropriate amounts. It does have some medicinal uses, but for the most part, it makes these nice V's that we can take advantage of, and it's a strong hardwood. It's kind of all over the place in my region. So, yeah, we're going to start with this. Not sure how this is going to turn up on camera because it's starting to become dusk here. So I've tried to add some extra lighting, but we're going to snip away these extra branches, and I may keep them for another project. So I think we have what we need freed up, and it's just a matter of shaving. It's just a matter of taking our cutting tool and shaving it. And this would be for a big fish. It's winter time here, and so a lot of the big fish are kind of hungry. So if you're into that ice fishing, then you know this might be a good tool for you. Don't know. You check with your local authorities, DNR, because spearing can be illegal, especially if you're non-native. So just FYI, and you're not in a survival situation. So, but the idea is so that we have two prongs, or a Y, I should say, versus a V. Alright, so these here we can set aside. So anyways, what we're going to do is, let's see, so this prong is a little larger than this one. So we're going to kind of shave it down, and that'll help get rid of some of the branches that make this sticky or hurtful. Alright, so I got a stone here and I crushed this so that we have nice long pieces of shards for the bone, and it's just a turkey bone. I would like to have gotten my deer bone or even beef bones, but this should work. And now I have to go clean out the marrow on here, and then we can sand and shape this so that we have two identical pieces that should work for us. Okay, so it looks like we have a couple of good pieces here that'll work. I just need to take some sandpaper and some thyme and elbow grease and just sand these down so that they're nice and flat, and to shape them the way that I need to shape them. And so I'm not going to film that. I'm just going to go ahead and take some time to do it. And this is the type of busy work where you can kind of multitask, meaning you can listen to a podcast or watch a educational video or something like that while you're doing it. So this will take some time to abrade this to the proper size and shape that I want. Alright, so this is the tip here, and I went on ahead and shaped it a little bit, added some tallow to it, and put it under some heat to harden it a bit. And so your tips for hunting and fishing materials need to be needle sharp. You need to be afraid of them yourself, because they need to be able to penetrate your target. And as you see, I've cut this at an angle. I have to do this to the other prong here, which we'll do shortly here. And then I also, excuse me, I'm off camera. I also went on ahead and created the bone barbs that we're going to attach, and they're pieces of bone, specifically I believe there's a turkey bone, and again the barbs themselves need to be needle sharp, so you need to be afraid of them, and you just grind them down or braid them down to the desired size and sharpness. Okay, so we're going to attach these. So basically what we will end up with is the end product. End product will end up looking something like this. Okay, if I can kind of emulate what that's going to look like. Alright, so we're basically going to have a barb that's going to fit on the end of here. Now it's kind of wide from the size, from the side of the prong here. Again, this is to the size of your quarry, to the size of what you're after. I mean, it's obviously for big fish like carp or sheephead or something like that. So you know, something that's really big, and obviously you would have a smaller fish spear or fish spearhead for obviously smaller fish, and your barbs might want to be a little bit closer to the shaft. Okay, so it's to scale. I'm making a pretty big one here for demonstration purposes, to be obviously, right? So in my original here, you can see that the barbs are really close to the shaft, or to the prongs. Okay, so that's kind of how the barbs are. That I made the barbs close to the shaft there. Okay, so once they penetrate, they go in, and then they should catch. Okay, and they don't have to be terribly long at all. They could just be just enough to make sure that they lock on to your target. Okay, so so the next thing I'm going to do here is we're going to go ahead and I'm going to cut this at an angle similar to this side. I'm going to shape it. I'm going to fire harden it, and then I'm going to stain this with our black walnut stain. I have another video on how to make that, and we don't have to do that. I'm just doing it for aesthetics. You don't have to. In a pinch, you don't really care about making it look pretty as long as it functions. But that's what I'm going to do. And then let's see here, and then we will attach the prongs, or excuse me, we will attach the barbs. Okay, so I sharpened the other prong, which is this one right here, and made it sharp, and then fire harden it, add a little oil to it, and then put it over heat. So that's kind of why it's got the char going on here. So that's it. That's kind of that's the process, more or less. Okay. So before we add our barbs, I'm gonna, like I said, I'm gonna go ahead and stain this, and just to give it some color, some character. In a real situation, I'm not gonna waste the time doing that. And another thing I want to state that you don't necessarily have to add these bone barbs to this sort of fish spearhead. Okay, you don't have to do that. You can actually carve them into the wood. That's a little longer process, but if you don't have the bones and whatnot to do so, then you would simply carve it into the wood and then fire harden it from there. Make sure that the barb and the point is needle sharp, and you're good to go. I may do a video on at least what that might look like on one prong, just to kind of give an idea of what that looks like, versus going through the whole process of making a whole nother fish spearhead. But I'm just adding the bone barbs as an extra measure, but you don't have to do this. You can carve it into the wood. So I'm going to go ahead and stain this. Now, because of the oil that I added to the tips here, that it may not take, and that's fine. Again, this is not a very necessary part of the process. Otherwise, I would have done it after the fact. So I'm going to let this sit now, and I may add just one more coat, and then we'll call it a day. Okay, so I have attached the barb to the first prong here, and I initially wrapped it with artificial sinew, but I didn't want to give the impression that you would actually use sinew for the wrapping. So this looks a little bulky right now, because then I went and got some dog bane stalks and processed the fibers so that I could do a wrapping with the plant fibers. Sinew, you can get it wet and it'll wrap and stick on itself because it has natural glues. What happens though is when it gets wet, it's water soluble, it'll come undone. So it's not the best lashing material for something like this, for a tool like this. It's going to be in and out of the water. So I'm just using dog bane as an additional wrap, so it looks a little bulky, more bulkier than I'd like it to. I may take it off later, but I just wanted to make sure I get that across. So you'd use plant fibers. I've already used some pine pitch, and I have a pitch stick here that we're going to be using to attach the other barb, and that's why I have some paper here, because I want to be able to keep the surface clean from getting a pine pitch on here. Alright, so we're going to begin, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut another notch into this prong, because I want the lashings to stick or to connect and not slide up and down the prong here. I'm just going to cut a little notch, not too much, and then just kind of shape this. Put that in there, and then cut that off like that. So yeah, we're gonna be doing some other notches in a little while as well, to tie the cabling. So essentially what I'm gonna do is I have a heat source here, and I want to get my pine stick. I want to heat it up so that it becomes malleable again, becomes sticky again. So I'm just going to heat this up. Usually you'll know because it'll start dripping. And maybe we don't want to wait for that. Heat this up nice and good, and then take it and rub the pitch onto the surface that we're trying to stick to. Like so. A little bit more. So this is a bit of a process, but you know, I'm not going to take you through the whole thing, but just to give you an idea. And with the pine pitch, you kind of have to work quickly because it likes to dry real quick. Dries quickly. Alright, so I've got some pine pitch on the surface that we're going to attach our barb. So I'm going to get my barb here. That is made out of bone here. And what I want to do is I want to heat up the pitch here, and I want to rub, get some pine, pick up some pine pitch on the barb as well. That should do it. So I've got some pitch on the tip of my barb here. And now I want to heat the surface up. And then quickly attach this because it likes to dry very quickly. I just want to heat this up kind of nice and slowly, and then take the barb, and I'm probably going to be off camera for this, and then stick it on here just like so. And while it's still a little malleable, the pine pitch is, you can shape it and make sure it fits onto your tip appropriately or solidly. So I'm using some more heat here, and you know, you basically at a campfire basically heat up a stick and that has some flame to it, or even has an ember on it to it, and melt your pine pitch. So I'm using modern tools, but that's how you would do it, quote unquote, primitively or at a campfire. So this is on here pretty well. I think that's an okay job. Okay, and again, these are pretty big barbs. This would be for some pretty big fish, obviously. You want to do this to scale. You know, you want something to the size of the fish that you're going to be after. Like I would probably have this 2 sizes down if I was going after, say, even a bass or something like that. But like for a big old carp or something like that, this might work. The barbs might need to be a little shorter, but you have to do this to scale. So to be consistent with what we have on the right one here, I'm going to take my artificial sinew, all right, and we'll just say it's just cordage, very thin here, and we're going to do some whipping, all right, and I have to include a video on how to do this. It might be too hard to see on camera right now, but I'm basically making a loop, and I'm winding the long end around, and I make sure that it gets set into the notch that we cut in here earlier. I'm winding this around so that it will hold on to, it'll hold on to our barb. Okay, so looks like we've got our barbs on here. I'm using the cordage to wrap it, and used common whipping so that we don't have a bunch of knots to tie it in there. I thought I had done a video on that. I may have to redo one just so that people know what I'm talking about when I say common whipping. So we've got our barbs on here. I'm gonna go a step further just to keep it consistent with this one here, and I've got some dog vein fibers here then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to wrap and keep it consistent with this one, again, to illustrate that you would use a plant-based fiber, not animal-based fibers or animal-based cordage. I suppose really thin rawhide or really thin buckskin would work as well. But what you don't want to use is sinew because it's water soluble. So I'm going to extract some fibers from this bundle that I have here. This is dog bane cordage, and then I'm just going to go ahead and wrap it, and then I'll show you the end result. Alright, so we have our prongs on, and I'm using dog bane cordage, you know, just as an additional wrap. Makes it a little bulky. Again, this is for demo purposes. I may take it off. I probably should have used that originally from the start, but I had to go out to the garage to get more dog bane stock, so I was being lazy there and not thinking ahead. At any rate, the idea is to get the concept across. So we've got our barbs on. Now at this stage, because we've made the tips here, you know, needle sharp, and you can always take a little bit of sandpaper and touch it up, both the barbs and the tip and the point ends. Now this is dangerous, okay? So don't poke yourself in the eye with this. This is now a dangerous tool. It's a dangerous weapon. You can hurt yourself with it, hurt somebody else with it. So moving forward, got to be careful. And then you also want to be careful with the barbs because you don't want to chip, break, or blunt them. Like I said, you may, you know, if you make one and you need to, or rather you go out and you test, you'd have to touch up the pointy parts. There, I will express this a little later on. Depending on where you're at in the country and what state you live in, or what part of the world you live in, spear fishing may be illegal. I know many native communities have that immunity. They can net and they can spear, but us people who are not part of a native tribal community, you have to check your local laws. This is just for information, education, and for emergencies only if you're ever stuck in the middle of nowhere and you need to get some food. So check with your local laws. Okay, so on this original one, I have some cable suspension here. Now, what this is for is to keep this, to keep the prongs from separating. All right, this is not something you would use on a rocky bottom bed. I mean, you got to do what you got to do in a survival situation, but just know that you're going to blunt your tips, and if you don't provide some sort of cabling of some sort to keep these prongs together, then they will spread apart on you. So I've got some dog bane cordage that I twisted, and we're going to use that as a cabling system for this size of fish spearhead. So just going to go through that. We're going to have to cut some notches here and here, and you know, kind of put some grooves in here at the bottom so that the cabling sits properly and things don't slide up and down. Now we're ready to attach the cabling, and I took some time and I cut some notches that are parallel to each other on each prong. I don't want to cut too deeply because I don't want to weaken the integrity of the prong. All right, just enough to create a shelf so that the cabling doesn't slide. And I also scored some wedges, some notches in here for the cabling to sit so it kind of stays nice and sturdy. So we've got our cordage here, and basically on one end I want to just tie just a an overhand knot. We're going to do that twice so that we just have a regular old knot, okay? And I'm going to do this kind of loosely at first to show you how this wraps around, how this goes together, and then I'm going to tighten it and do it properly, more tightly off camera. because I have to kind of manipulate it and spin it around and all this and that. So then anyways, I want to take this, you want to kind of pull your prongs together and then wrap this side down like so, and it sits on the notch that you made, and it should sit on the shelf. I might have to make that a little deeper, just a little tad bit deeper so it doesn't slide. But then this is going to go down, and it's going to go basically where one notch that you created would be, and then we're going to go around about twice so that we come up for the other side like so, and then we'll tie it off. We'll attach it to this end like so. So we have this configuration. Okay, so you attach it here, pull it around to the other side, loop it down, bring it down towards the shaft, wrap it around twice so you end up coming back, so you create an X, and then attach it to the other side, and that should keep the prongs from spreading apart. And then you'd probably want to play with the length depending on the depth that you're trying to. You might need to insert this into your target. So again, this is for demo. It's one of those things where you just kind of getting the concept across, but I probably would have gone a little bit lower, just so I have plenty of room for a real good deep thrust. So at any rate, that's how you do it. So I'm gonna go ahead and properly or tightly attach the cabling, and I'll be right back. Okay, so here we have the cabling attached, and I just made it, a little tighter, so it's holding the prongs together. And this, if this was just connected to one large shaft, we would be done. But we're going to go a step further, and like the original here, we have a we'll say a tongue that we're going to create, and then up top here we have cordage that would be attached to the main shaft, because the main shaft, it would fit into the main shaft like this, and then if you thrust this into the fish is going to wriggle around it, so you want to have some give so it doesn't wriggle off of your spear tip. So this will give some give. Sometimes the fish will want to take off, and then you'll need to have a leash, a lanyard that's attached to the main shaft so that you don't lose your fish and your spearhead. So to finish this piece up, we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that. I've already got a crack in this buckthorn here, so I'm going to have to kind of saw this off a little bit, and then we're going to create a tongue for this. Okay, in our shaft here, I've cut some grooves or some slits that are right opposite, perpendicular to one another on each side, and we want to try and pry away the wood from the base of the slit, all right, to the end of the shaft here. And so I think how I'm going to try to do this is take my cutting tool here, see if I can use the tip to kind of pry into. And I'm going to start on the outside first. Yeah, this should work. This works slowly and methodically. See if we can get this to come free. And then we'll need to cut this a little deeper so that we don't lose it doesn't ride up the shaft. So this is the start of it. Okay, I'm gonna have to take my time, and you know, there's plenty of knots in here, and that's where the branch had another limb or thorn coming up. So we'll have to work around that, and I'll have to do the same thing on the other side. So just low and slow. Take your time, so you don't make any mistakes as best you can. And then we'll just keep plodding along until we get what we need. Alright, so here's the progress so far, and I'm just taking off little bits at a time so I don't get too thin and it's not too thick. And we have a lip so it can sit if I choose to place this on a larger or bigger shaft. Okay, and then I will, you know, saw down deeper, and then slowly pick off or pry off the fibers, and then I can shave this off, kind of whittle this to the shape that I want. So I'm just taking my time here. I want to make sure that the sides are even as much as possible, and we'll just keep going. Okay, we're at a stage where I may want to start to sand this down as opposed to whittling it. Sometimes you can take off too much, so you can always take off. You can take off too much, but you can't put it back. So at this stage, we'll just take some rough sandpaper and just kind of start to shape and sand this down so that it's even and straight and smooth. And then we'll cut some notches in here for our lanyard, and we'll be done. Alright, so I braided this, made kind of some mistakes, got a little higher than I wanted to. That kind of stuff happens, but it's not, it didn't really ruin anything. It just took away from some of the aesthetics. So, but gotta be careful when doing this sort of stuff. At any rate, again, I'm not trying to make a museum piece per se. So at any rate, I'm gonna go ahead and we're gonna cut some notches in here. Stain this a little bit with the walnut dye, and then we'll cut some notches in here for our lanyard. Okay, so I've cut 2 parallel lines here like so, and we're going to make a trough or a groove so that our cordage can fit on this end of the shaft, and then when it's set into a main shaft, we do the same thing on the main shaft, and the cordage would be attached to that in that manner. In retrospect, making the tongue and doing all this grooving should have been the first thing we did, to be honest, because now I have to be very, very careful of the tips now that they're done. I don't want to bang them or ding them into anything, ruin them basically. So I have to be very careful at this stage. So in retrospect, do this part first. So yes, again, you want to braid or cut in your grooves parallel, and then you take the tip of your tool and you're going to pick out the fibers all the way around to create a groove or a trough. You can go from one groove line to the other groove line. Just kind of whittle up all the way around. So either way would work. And then what I would do is I'd go from the other side to my desired depth. Okay, so we've got our groove cut in, and we're just going to attach the lanyard here with the set within the groove so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay, so we're ready to attach our lanyard in the groove to our fish spearhead, And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to give me about, I don't know, 2.5 inches or so of my running end. This is the standing end, the longer one. And I want to give this, I want to twist this around maybe once or twice. And then I'm going to slip this underneath the loop here, underneath the V here, and then cinch it. And I got the cordage wet so I can make a nice tight knot. So this will fit in there nice and tightly. You may not have seen that. I may have to make a video on how to make that knot. So you could do a double overhand knot, granny knot within here. Whatever knot is going to be most secure for you, that's most easiest for you, should work. You could probably even do whipping if you wanted to. And then you have this straggler here. I may snip it off, or I may tuck it in somewhere. But there it is. It's attached. It's not going anywhere, and it's not going to slide. And if I was to get something with this fish spear, all this is going to do is provide basically a line that's going to be attached to my main shaft. So you'd have a configuration. If my fist is the main shaft, this would be fitting in here. This would be attached to my wrist, so to speak, like that. And then if the fish takes off, you still have the cordage that will hold on and keep your spear and spearhead and keep your fish. So that's it for this tutorial, for this video. Again, it's a bit of a process, and you don't have to do the whole bone thing. It just adds a little bit more oomph to your thrust. You could just really whittle a barb and a very sharp point to the ends here, and that'll be just as good. So anyways, that's it.